Yep. Of the in just thinking about this game in general, of the three so far, uh Saki is incredibly interesting and she's a very modern woman. And then we have Riona, which is actually probably the most traditional when it comes to what our priorities and whatnot are. And the arena is like the one that I would probably resonate with entirely. So it almost felt a little bit like pandering a little bit because Arena's character is very similar to. It's one of those like you have a connection with at a younger age. Like I would see myself. She's 23 because we know from the guessing. It was around that age. I probably had very similar perspectives and whatnot. So she had very similar problems, similar guilty pleasures, all that stuff. So it was kind of nice to see a character that was written like that. It's very rare to find characters written that represents a subset of people like myself, but this game is in 2016, so the behavior that I'm talking about that she has, her personality, would be 13 years ago. So back in like the 2000s, that's not as a common outlooking perspective. I was thinking about the faking personality being more likable a lot recently. I only caught the ending though, so I'm not entirely what. Yeah, her story is um she's overly conscientious. She wants to be an actress, so she's saving money to be an actress. Uh, she loves eating. Everything's about eating. So whenever she anything you talk about that she likes to talk about, she loves eating. She is extroverted. She is introverted, but she is skilled at socializing. So what that means is she has a dissonance between understanding how to communicate with people, but she does it anyways. That's what the whole fake thing came out. She's overly conscientious, so she knows how to behave and communicate properly. But at the same time, she is not communicating based on her introversion. So she's not extroverted in the sense that when she likes to socialize a lot, she's not projecting her personality. She's being agreeable. So that's kind of that whole thing that I described way back in my youth, where you spend most of your time trying to develop socializing skills to compensate for not projecting onto other people. So um, she's still struggling with the dissonance that comes from that. So she knows how to communicate. She doesn't know the perspective of communicating with people. So it got her into trouble leading on to people. So she had problems making friends because all her friends think she's just being agreeable for the sake of being agreeable. And then she made a friend in the process of you interacting with her. And she tells you that most of her girlfriends think she's always leading guys on and being fake, which is not necessarily true because it goes deeper than that. She's trying to be agreeable because that's what is appropriate. And then that she doesn't have, and consequently, she doesn't have any relationships, right? And whatnot. And she's a video gamer, so she has all the characteristics of an introverted person, classically introverted, contextually, but not really like bona fiable, which is like video games, but she has no person to play with, kind of thing, but wanting to play with another person. So she's like seeking personal connections, but unable to project them because she is practicing developing communication skills. So it's pretty much the whole 9 yards. And then she absolutely loves eating. So the only time she have expressed genuine projection of her personality is when she's doing something emotional that deals with the senses. So that deals with being upset, being lonely, eating. So that's kind of like I resonated with it because when I was in my 20s, that's more or less where I was in my state of mind. So what Kiryu acted as was like the conduit for inspiration for that, which ultimately becomes with like being more assertive. And you have to give way being less agreeable to be more assertive. And that's kind of what happened from like 21 and on. That's when I started balancing being more assertive. So I could really super relate to that. That's the first character. I think what we've gone through 2, 2, 12, 23, 36, 57 hostesses now across 7 games. It might be like give or take 3. So let's just round it up to 60. It's been 60 characters, and this would be the first character that if I didn't have to explain anything, like if there was a character that was written to be as closely representative as in my early like adulthood, Erina is pretty close. Like that's pretty close. Only with the topics that were written in. So usually it deals with food. And food, friends, special interests, hobbies, dreams, the superficial stuff. Like when I mean by superficial, I mean the stuff that they don't go too deep in because it can get really difficult to balance in terms of these games. Like if you had 5 hostesses and you go too deep into one, the other 4 would feel a little cheapened, or they would have to go into that, and it would kind of dominate the game. So yeah, it was pretty. It was different. It was a different feel. What that comes to mind about her after hearing the story is that she is very intelligent. Not sure how accurate. She is very intelligent, and she likes her ideal type of guy is someone who's quiet and intelligent. And she wants to do everything with film. Her favorite thing is film. Her childhood dream was wanting to be a film director, which was one of was my primary childhood dream. I did take film classes in high school. She was part of the film club, and then she wanted to develop that skill of communication. So she eventually wanted to be an actress. She wants to be in a movie. So the idea is she is learning to be assertive to express those things, but she doesn't boldly express them. And for me, I gave up those things because of adhering to appropriateness. So I chose science and all that stuff while dabbling in those things, but it just doesn't, it's not culturally, like, I guess it's not culturally acceptable as a career path way back in my youth, right? So it wasn't long ago. It's only over a decade ago. So it was like coincidence. All this is coincidence. You don't have to like film, right? You don't have to like, but these are very correlating. So the way the character was written correlates really well together. It's not uncommon for these things to be together. Like liking quiet places, wanting to go out, but really have to stay in. That's what she mentioned. Like she really wants to eat out, but it costs a lot. Like so, the whole to and fro. It was really well written. It's a great character. I'm always curious in my mind when I'm like going through these hostesses throughout the game, if where did they get these stories and these profiles of people? I I don't think this is a strong if. I'm making the presumption because the way I'm reacting to these and always talking about the hostesses, these are small pocket stories, as in they're not a complete work of fiction. There's realistic corollaries in the way they're written. So it can very well be personal snapshots of either the voice actress who shared their likeliness, right, their likeness to the performance, or they sampled stories, like people's live stories, and then wrote them in. Because it flows really well, like down to how when they take a dialogue, it will relate to something else, which will relate to something else. And most of them are very naturally associated with each other. It's very rare to find a character that's like, that's really out of character. There are a few exceptions, but those are the ones that stick out as well. But I would say there's been like two or three that for me I haven't experienced before, like encountered in the wild or IRL. That was super interesting, but I find them very difficult to know if they are a work of fiction or they were based on someone, right? And those are super interesting. They stick out, but at the same time, I think most of the time, I would say 90% of 95% of the time, those characters and their stories and their responses aren't entirely a piece of work of fiction. So like what I mean by that is they're not written for the sake of the game or like making it feel like a game. Like anime a lot of times can feel like the characters are written to meet a need, meet a convention, meet a trope. And this game can feel like that, but when they're meeting the trope, like most of them, like you have to think about it mechanically because the way the game is presented, you get the full spectrum of hostesses. I mean, in reality, if you go to a club, there's a chance you get a smaller spectrum, right? But in this club, you just happen to have five representative hostesses. I'm gonna expect them to be complementary to each other, as opposed to, uh, very overlapping because of a brand. And you can still see that deliberate, wide variety kind of thing that typically doesn't happen. And I'm gonna be, if you understand like universal statistics and probability on a large, like on a smaller sample, tend to cluster. So they don't like individually, uh, always neatly diverse. But the writing to account for the tropes are so well written to the point it's not to discredit them actually. It's actually impressive. Like basing something on a realistic sub story and attention detail are like not mutually uh cannot be mutually separated. While work of fiction, like creating a character out of fiction, it's hard for me to believe, but they must have done their due diligence to find inspiration for these characters because it's some of the most natural writing as opposed to like a video game character, like a visual, not like, I know people like their visual novel games, but the visual novel game has a crutch a lot of times, and that is to, when you play a visual novel game, the whole game, you have the whole duration of the game to give you an impression of a dynamic characters, like dynamic characters. And that there's uh, a lot of it things to admire about that. But the one crutch about that is you have the whole duration, all that length to portray a character realistically. And even then, visual novel games come under the weight of breaking character sometimes, going to extremes and mechanically trying to serve something for the player, like inherently throwing herrings and stuff. And the ones among the top is able to mitigate that feeling through the entire length. But in this game, you have so limited time, and they still manage to emulate. I feel like it's improving, like it's getting even better. Able to emulate the experience of technically a fictional character, but I don't think I think it's realistic fiction. That it's semi-autobiographical, in my opinion, and they managed to do it with superficial topics like first time meetings, like little things like food and dreams and stuff, not, you know, scars, like lots of trauma and like really stuff that gets a little way too excessive. So that last character, that was the first character. It was like reading a book. So that was pretty great. It was a different feeling. It's a feeling that I don't usually have too much, because characters aren't typically written like that. I mean, you know, you got to remember that when you're playing a video game, especially a role-playing game, you're not the main character. So when you bump into a character that is in the game that's kind of like you, that's a different feeling. Usually, most of the time, you're like, oh yeah, that's what this character would do. Oh, that checks out. Like, okay, that checks out. Like, oh yeah, right. That kind of thing. Like, I can't resonate with Kiryu, obviously. Like, he's a great person. I wouldn't mind trying to behave like him every once in a while or something like that. He's very inspirational, but I'm not Kiryu in any way. Like, maybe 40% of the time I might be able to agree with some of the stuff he does, but it doesn't mean I don't like him as a character, right? But Arena, that was that hit a little close to home, so that was definitely worth for pause. All right, we got two more characters. Two more characters. Most of Arena's stuff is not inherently. She's also one thing to say, and not for trendy, what I'm about to say, it's not the trendy use of it, but most of her concerns and her things that she's concerned with is gender neutral. So what I mean is, often when I was younger, most of the problems I have are relatable to both genders. So it sometimes can create confusion. So it makes me not great with being connected with males and females. And it's also written in her character. Arena has this issue where she's ebb and flowing for both, like, for the topics, right? Like for her, whatever she wants to consider her route to success. So it happens a lot. And so basically in my youth, I had a lot of male and female acquaintances, but I had very few like friends that don't just see me as a vehicle to use or an opportunistic time to get my help, right? And to this day I still have very few friends, but I had just as many friends of both genders because I wasn't really concerned with that kind of thing, and it was reflected in this, so it was really great. I truly think that character was based on a person, like, and all the other characters. It's just for that one, her character actually exists because I lived that character. So it was really, can't say enough about it. Like, I was that guy that someone said, you know, what do you say to a girl or what do you say to a guy? And I'd just be there like listening. It's like, well, you just say what they want to hear. And in a sense, we're not talking about like a malicious fakeness. Like a you when I was younger, I just know what to say to them. But the thing is, it can be misconstrued as being fake because all I really wanted is to always tell people what they want to hear. And nowadays, the new age perspective is that's not being fake. That's being true to what you want. That's basically uh how you want to do it. Like being agreeable is the greatest skill in my opinion to me, right? My greatest asset is being agreeable. But way back in the day, even now, I guess, being agreeable can be seen as disingenuous, which is pretty much a stereotype that I tend to talk against all the time because I'm defending my own character, right? So ironically, to be more assertive is to be disagreeable about purposefully and intentionally being agreeable. That's a paradox right there. But well, it's a weird paradox where that in order to portray my greatest asset, what I would consider my greatest strength, I have to negate the greatest asset. It's generally the only time that I am disagreeable. And that's talking about the validity and the generosity and the genuineness of being nice. And whenever someone tells me that they're nice and they tell me they're nice and think it's a nice thing, I'm usually the one that is going to be disagreeable in this situation. Because going around bragging that you're nice and you strive to be nice doesn't leave you with a cozy feeling. Not even to this day, and apparently not to Japan, sort of. They were using this as an indication or a representation of status quo about Japan 2016, I suppose. Obviously, I'm being very quotey about this because it's like hand wavy. This is not a representation. It's just a sample of it. If you think you're a nice person, like truly in that definition of being a nice person, I've said this a couple of times already. When you say it I don't go out of my way to say I'm a nice person. It doesn't leave great feelings. Like being genuinely a nice person gets you that. It gets you to people thinking you're fake most of the time. It gets people to think you are a sycophant, as in you're a person that sucks up to other people and never reveals what they're thinking, always hiding their opinions. So when people go around throwing the niceness thing where like I'm always nice, people like me because I'm nice, the phrase that I would specifically use is selective. You are very selectively nice. You are selectively kind. The better word is kind. You choose when to be kind to someone. And it's often someone you like more. It's something you're emotionally attached to. And I know you say finding a resonance to fictional characters sound interesting. No idea how that feels though. It's kind of incredibly ironic, but at the same time, incredibly poetic. That people like yourself, Worm, you are actually in the majority. That most of the characters in video games tend to have conflicts, personality dissonances that when evaluated from a different perspective, you would resonate uncannily well. The downside to that is it's a paradox. For people that are self-centered, as in you think you're higher of of higher importance, and that's very important because you need self-esteem and assertiveness to get to that position. It's very common to not resonate with any other character because it's in your nature to think about yourself. So, yes, it's incredibly ironic, but it's also a paradox. The the motivations of a lot of characters represent the more self-centered perspective. Even Kiryu, the paradox here is for character to be like Kiryu, as in to resonate with Kiryu, you don't have the properties to resonate in the first place. Like you are less likely to resonate with a character like Kiryu if you're like Kiryu. So you're like Kiryu, in which Kiryu is the main character. He holds a ton of weight. When he is in the room, there are no other characters that overlap with him because he is self-righteous. He is conviction. He is the main character. He holds himself to incredible high standards, and what he thinks is right, he does it. So when you are in that room, wherever Kiryu walks, there are only different characters that can occupy the same space as Kiryu. So all the other characters, all the villains are another Kiryu character in which they have to occupy the same space. But Kiryu wins out. In a different world, those characters could have won out, and it would be the same structure. They are the Kiryu of the other space. So the irony here is that is one of the most common personality traits with people online. The main character effect. So whenever I look at people play, and when people say, "Oh, you know, I wouldn't do that," in that situation, hypothetically, right? And or like I wouldn't do this. Like, to me, as someone who can't relate to those characters, because I'm at the double standard end, the one that always look for resonance. I can't resonate with a lot of things, but I can see when other people resonate with the obvious stuff. The downside is I wouldn't be able to resonate with those characters. So on the flip side, it's easy for me to see how self-centered people and like very confident and prideful people resonate with most of the characters. In fact, I find it really endearing. Here's a great example in a video game to demonstrate two characters that are not aware. It's a really cliche line in character development. When someone says two Kiryu personalities, like yourself, I would include you, Worm, two self-centered characters come together, and the first phrase they say to each other, "You know what? After all this fighting, you and I are not that different." That exemplifies the vast majority of players who play these games, and ironically actually do not resonate with playing a character that's with the proper perspective is exactly like them. So what you said was what I find endearing and kind of funny, very poetic about human condition. Because on my end, all I see is a bunch of characters that resonate with you most of the time, and a ton of other people online. Like the vast majority of people who stream on Twitch and play video games for their own interest would be classically resonating with pretty much half the characters to 2/3 of the characters in Yakuza, because the whole organized crime thing, the organization, the importance of legacy and status is what people are going for. But the irony is, because you are like them, you are less likely to resonate with them. because you are unique. You are a character that thinks you stand alone. You have properties. You're really complex. You can't be summarized by a character that's fictional. It's incomprehensible, and it's really cool if you understand the human condition. So, to me, the only character you can possibly resonate with that you don't find offensive is a character you build from blank slate. So games like FromSoft and stuff capitalize with a blank character. And that blank character can only be you because it's only filled with what you've done. So they games that are non-role playing, they make you the main character. And that's why you can resonate with the blank character, because the character is an extension of you. You project into that character. To be able to resonate with a fictional character, as in a role-playing game, if you don't like role-playing games, you are not like me. That's just how it goes, unfortunately. You can choose to understand me, but you don't have to be me to be happy or successful or what have you. It's just a different perspective. So, and a personal preference. So when you look through your video game catalog or something, right? And you see, I only play games where I don't care about story more than I care about mechanics, how I feel as a player, how I react to things, how it makes me feel, then you're not a person that can resonate with me ever, until it maybe changes, maybe a different spark of life or a crisis. But that's how it is. And it's really ironic, because if you ask me what's my favorite type of video game, it would be role-playing games. And then the idea would be, you would, from a self-centered perspective, you would ask, why do you like role-playing games? It's like, it's because you relate to the fictional characters, right? The answer is a resounding no. A person like me finds 95 to 99% of characters unrelatable. I cannot resonate with them. I can resonate with like bits and pieces of them, but I can tell you that from these role-playing games, analyzing these characters, what the developer intends, what they're writing on, what they're based on, help me act agreeable to the majority of players. As in, understanding Kiryu is a great example to understanding what people want. Like, Kiryu is a character that people play. Like, they're okay with playing it. They don't resonate with the character, but Kiryu as a conduit of projection, he's popular now. Like, he's mainstream enough. Other video games, they're mainstream enough. So if you study those things, you get a lens into people you don't resonate with. So when I play video games, especially role-playing games, popular fictional characters people like or somehow inherently like, if you find someone who is self-centered, which is typically the majority of the sampling size of video gamers, and you find a popular video game character, that becomes an object of desire. So as a self-centered person, you tend to resonate, even loosely, not completely, to a character that embodies your desires, as in what you want to be. You want to be an OP guy who beats the crap out of everything and everyone loves them. You want to be a superhero. You want to be a guy who wears nothing and one-shots things, or beats a boss with a blade and just their two bare hands without ever getting hit. That's the embodiment of someone who is exactly opposite of me. What do I want to be? I want to live the life of a person who has crippling depression. I want to know what it's like to be an arrogant, gray area person and all the struggles and life things that they want to, because I don't understand that stuff. So all that stuff is really interesting to me. Organized crime is interesting. True crimes, what we know about serial killing, like things like that. But I want to know those things and those tales because I can't relate to them at all. This thing about similar characters not resonating with each other because they share a sense of their own uniqueness I'm not sure that's the reason I can't relate to these characters. Also because I kind of lied. I remember a character who was I desire to be some extent, and that was Roberto from So what I don't know, while you were typing the whole thought, you heard what I said most recently, but I'll reiterate. The things that a person like you, who have similar characters, type 1, selfish uniqueness, is the embodiment of why you resonate with someone who you desire to be. It is generally the closest thing to someone who favors themselves, a uniqueness, as the point of interest. So it relates to the first point, is that the character that you resonate with is not literal, is the representation of your aspirations. So you want to be a superhero. You want to be an archetype that embodies your desires. That's kind of what propels that resonance. So instead of looking for what I consider as resonance, individuals with more of the other personality, like yours, I would say, your resonance means something different. And yes, it's true, whenever I describe what I resonate with, it's not the same. You won't ever resonate, in my opinion, in the same way as I do, because your resonance is different. Like, you're resonating, you're looking for something different. You're inherently resonating to a different thing that I do not value. So I'm not valuing resonating what I want or what I want to be. I'm resonating with people who I'm trying to resonate with people who I can't resonate with. But from time to time, like this character that I'm mentioning now, just coincidentally, the character is like me, which that's rare. So that last experience was so different. It's one of the few rare moments. That's not 99% of my experience. Most of my experience is trying to understand a character I can't resonate with. Your experience is you only choose to resonate with the characters that you choose to that you desire. And that means you have a more clear cut of what you can and cannot resonate with. For me, it's more about luck. It's just happenstance that it would happen. There's no quality that I'm looking to resonate, because I don't expect to resonate with anyone. You know what you're trying to resonate with. That's why you can say that you don't resonate with anything. That's kind of like the interesting duality. It's a paradox. So all the things you say, it follows with that. So you wouldn't be able to. I absolutely agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. But it's still inherently because of your sense of self. Your sense of self is stronger, more dynamic, and more complex than any fictional character. And that makes it inherently not relatable. Meanwhile, what you said is basically what Kiryu would probably say for a fictional character. He'd probably say, oh, well, you know, I see your point. So what does Kiryu look up to? He look up to his mentor. The exaggerated archetype of grandiose. What is Kiryu's highest role model that he truly wants to resonate with? It's Shintaro Kazuma. He's like this lofty pedestal of a character that is ever present, even in death, even when it's revealed that he is the reason why Kiryu is orphaned. That's the character he resonates with. He resonates with his father figure. In this case, something really lofty. I can't relate to that. I see characters. I see people who have compromises, damage, baggage, and I won't be able to ever experience them. I don't aspire to maintain. I like being like other people. So that's what Erina struggles with. She wants to be what people want her to be. And for me, I wanted to be what people wanted me to be for the longest time. I still do. Only now I understand when I mislead people, which is what her realization at the end is. She has to be assertive when appropriate. Know when it's like, oh, am I giving the wrong impression? So let me just tell you, I want to make you happy. That's kind of one of the assertiveness. Like, I'm not going to argue with you, kind of thing. Or like if someone says like, why are you being argumentative? It's like, sorry, if it comes off that way, I'm not intending to, right? So those things are a natural way to develop out of the whole idea that you're just being pleasant. So they have these characters in this game. The characters that I'm describing, like me, like the archetypical character like me, are all the supporting characters that take up like 5% of the screen time. Edina literally only took up like 20 minutes, right? Nakajima took up a little bit longer, maybe like 30 minutes. Like all the supporting characters that are around Kiryu are there, but they're not the center of attention. They inherently aren't. Like Kiryu is a kind person. The character you play is very kind. He's not indiscriminately nice. He's not a nice person because he has to fight people. He has to choose sides. A nice person just doesn't do any of that. In fact, the nice people will be the first person to die out of indecision. So that's kind of why Arena struggled. And that's kind of why I was really depressed when I was a kid. It was like the root problem of being depressed when I was a kid. No one really likes you because you don't share anything about yourself. And then they actually like you because it's like them. So like people like me because when I'm with them, I'm like them. But they also don't trust me and connect with me because they know very little about me. That's kind of the trade-off. And somewhere along the line, I found a more reasonable balance to communicate that. Like, hey, you know I'm disappointed in you almost all the time. But that disappointment isn't out of malice or out of uncaring maliciousness. You know that I inherently am disappointed. It gotten to the point where I actually thought I was afraid I might be developing like dissociative personality disorders. That's when you start feeling like you live life through other people, and that's what defines you. So you lose a self-identity, right? And then when the people around that you don't have control over leaves you, then you no longer have a sense of self. But that's not true, obviously. I'm here now because I'm able to project, at least when I need to, what I like, what I don't like, what disappoints me, and whatnot. But if you get so caught up, like if you get really caught up in always putting on a face, it's more like living a life of being a spy, or like a double agent, or playing both sides all the time. You lose yourself. Like you just, when someone asks you like, what do you like? And the first response you have is, I like what you like. That's being nice. It's like, oh, what do you want to do? I'll do what you want to do. That was me for like a really long time. And it came from because when I was a kid, I had to hide what I was like. And that's not because of personality disorders or anything. It's because of my upbringing. I was a Chinese American. Like, all the stuff, I cannot be that kind of person because I get discriminated against. Right? Like, a lot of things, everything I liked or am, I try my best to conform. Because conforming makes me less of a target of discrimination, bullying. And yes, discrimination and bullying are two separate things, because you can be bullied not because of your race and stuff. It's because of your being or something. And then gender roles, culture in general, in any way, culture, like value system and whatnot. Social economic position. So my family wasn't rich, right? But we desire to have privileges, as in a better education and whatnot. That placed me in this socioeconomic discrimination. So all that stuff, when I was a kid, made me an expert. I mean, like, what as experts go, as in like not an expert as in intellectually, but intuitively. I've gotten so conditioned at blending in that that's what I do. I blend in until I got to college, and I thought, this is the time. College was open enough, even though it was fairly homogenous, culture-wise. It was the beginning where I could start differently. So I didn't start as another white kid who just happens to look Asian. I didn't start as another prodigal Chinese son who is gonna become a medical doctor and plays string instruments while juggling a job and getting 4.0s. So all that stuff kind of loosened when I went to college. And it's also because, I'm not around my parents anymore and all that stuff. So eventually I got some of that uniqueness that dominates Western culture, in my opinion. So now I do strongly assert things, although I'm always worried that I'm unintentionally gaslighting people. That's the inherent to feeling my perspective. Whenever I say something and I start telling people how I observe them and stuff, my first inclination that I'm worried about is I'm gaslighting by accident, like unintentionally or something. So take most of the stuff that I observe with a grain of salt, right? That's usually how I deflate my experience or my expertise. And that leads to imposter syndrome, where if I deflate too much, no one's going to trust me. That's what happens. So if you're always constitutively or normalizing being agreeable, you start losing your voice. You start having less of an impact, less of a standing, no opinions. You don't stick out anymore. Like, you do not get things done, lack of influence, no credibility, and surely all that would make you less likely to succeed. So the only way I managed to finally complete like my graduate career, right, getting the PhD for starters, is that from the time at college, I start redefining myself in a more assertive manner. Assertive enough to make myself look better than others. Make myself worth more than others. Picking me over other students. learning who I need to get to write my letters of recommendation, learning how to elevate my status over others. And in the moment I reached that state, the end of PhD, I just stopped. Like I was burned out. Like, because that's a state that I'm not used to. I do not enjoy convincing people to give me money and like all that other stuff. And it was part of the job. Like, you have to be able to sell yourself and whatnot. And that became a burnout. It was a state that I'm not usually inherently in. For others, though, and pretty much all my the vast majority of my colleagues, that's a different story. I earnestly do believe that is a social norm. The social norm of successful intellectuals are selectively kind people who have a great sense of self-identity and ironically know exactly what they desire in a projection of themselves in anything they consume because they're so inherently good at projecting but failing to resonate emotionally. That's the irony. So what makes you very strong and likely to succeed above other people or draw attention to yourself is the very inherent reason that's keeping you from being able to resonate with anything. And it's not to say you don't resonate with anything at all. It's that it's very small. It's the stronger you are as a character, as a uniqueness, the narrower the possibility of you resonating with someone. Like, because you don't need to. You don't feel compelled to. You don't find their life interesting. You don't find many things interesting unless it lines up with you. That makes you unique. The smaller the pool of resonance you have, the more specific the things you get, the more it depends individually. It depends if I need this so I can like this. You are unique. You are increasing your strength of self, in my opinion. You are contributing to how strong your identity is. But in exchange for that, you are less flexible, less agreeable, less likely to have more friends, as in like people who think you're charismatic, and more likely a presence. So your presence get boosted, but only to the selective group that you resonate with. And that's going to be very little. Like, it's going to be a small amount. So often you can practice the skill of resonating and improving your charisma. And for me, I do the opposite. Like, for example, if I really want to, quote unquote, ironically, like, or like, for lack of better term, resonate with more audiences so that I can reach more people to open up to, like, more people would want to watch me and play this and turn this into a career, right? Which is not my goal. I always like to emphasize that. But if I wanted to, I would have to practice something different. I have to practice standing out. I have to practice selling. And I don't mean by selling like literally selling. There are very complex ways of drawing attention to yourself. And inherently, I just choose not to because I don't have to yet. But if I do, it would be practicing a skill that I have not practiced in a couple years now. Like, and that's finding ways to advertise, finding ways to conditionally manipulate people to remembering me. I do that really well. Just, I don't do it anymore because I burned out like hard. Like every day it felt like back in the day I'm doing as much as I can to constantly work on making people care, making people think I'm important, because that's how you get influence. You are constantly reinforcing the idea that you're important. How do I do that? Well, I did spend a lot of years doing that to climb ladders, right? So those methods I'm so burnt out from that. It's left a really like emotional block for me. I am more afraid to do that unintentionally than ever before. So I'm really out of practice. But it doesn't mean I don't know the craft. So basically, like what is a really effective craft for streaming, right? The current craft for streaming is that you come up with you use your intellectual tools to constantly make it so that anyone who comes across you will not forget you. And there are a lot of, I even say low effort or high return, and low effort, like not in a bad way, more like it's ideal to have it low effort, because if you want to become popular and make a career out of it, you have to find as many efficient ways of doing so. So the goal is to leave an impression so they can't stop thinking about you. Always like wanting to hear the next thing that comes out of your mouth. I rarely ever want that, because the last thing I'm scared of, which is what agreeability and niceness gets you, is being held responsible for what you say. And because of that, I'm generally not willingly to ever try to draw attention to myself as a point of expertise, because it also means I get held responsible when I can't deliver. It's not a guarantee that I can ever deliver. If you don't feel this way, if you don't resonate with me in this way, then you are still more the people who go online. You don't feel like the norm for current gen is liking almost everything. It's just the current gen likes almost nothing. I don't know, like, I would vastly disagree with you. The current gen only likes the thing the algorithm provides, and that's the only thing they care about. Because algorithm provides what they want to see. So you inherently are arguing in that manner. The people around your age are getting attached to things, but also have dynamics about? No. I absolutely disagree. Like, the dynamics from your perspective is anything more dynamic than you. I do not see anyone as dynamic as before the internet age. But I didn't really spend time sampling. Yeah. So here's the thing, right? Our perspective. Unfortunately, what you consider dynamic and what I consider dynamic is on a different spectrum. So for me, a dynamic person would love to do something they hate. They would try to resonate with things they clearly don't resonate with. They would constantly place themselves in a situation they're not familiar with. Safely, of course, but... So the idea is that they rarely get attached to things. So they can't be both. It's rarely both, where you be dynamic and getting attached to things. Although that's kind of interesting that you think there are people who are very dynamic and have the capacity to get attached to that thing. When, like, we're talking about the same thing. Not like I get attached to drinking water and suddenly I'm dynamic and don't like water. So like we're comparing apples and apples, not apples and oranges, where like I like action games, but I don't like another genre that's unrelated. That doesn't introduce dynamics. The likelihood is you like action games and you like non-action games. That would be a dynamic person, but because you like non-action games, you're not inherently attached to action games. Right? Because if you like more than one thing that is not action and action, you're not actually attached to any one thing more. you would have trouble deciding which one you're more attached to. So am I attached to Like a Dragon right now? I am. I'm attached to the Like a Dragon series. But the moment I get to the end of the journey and I'm waiting, I'm no longer attached to it. Like, what is my favorite Yakuza game? It's not 0. I don't get attached to it. I'm attached to the thing that's happening right now, which is the discussion we're having, and the game I'm experiencing. That's a dynamic interest. It's not an attached interest. How do I define myself? Well, I define myself best now. If you're a person that gets attached to something, the first thing you would say is, well, I used to be a Fortnite pro. Or, well, I used to be really good at first-person shooters. That's the other type of personality. It's a person that gets attached to things. For me, the best me is right now. It's here, in the now. Because there's no version of me with more experience than the current me. So ask yourself if you surround yourself with people like that, then we can probably dig in a little deeper. But yeah, attached people, they define themselves very easily. Dynamic people do not have a really hard time defining themselves, and that's what makes them terrible at interviews. To be honest, I prefer to add these attachments up, not moving on and replacing. You add these. That no. That you've misinterpreted me. The sum of a dynamic person is everything that is there. Not replacing, not moving on. You just described a dynamic person, and you literally don't act that way, in my opinion. Like, if I had to give you an honest opinion, you literally don't act that way. If you can say that you used to feel this way, you do this before, or you don't like this anymore, you can't like this, you do like that, you are holding on to something. You are becoming attached to your past self. It's not about replacing it and moving on. What I'm saying is you are everything before this. I am everything before me. But none of a specific thing defines me. I'm not holding on to that. Everything is adding together. When you add everything together, you don't get you don't get the same thing. Like, for example, you could say, oh, I always liked FPSs. Like, I still like FPSs. That's holding on to something. That's becoming attached to your, like, you're effectively replacing things because you can't possibly like something else if it's not that. What I'm saying is exactly what you said, though. I prefer to add everything. You are the summation of everything. That's the idea. So every new thing you get is an opportunity to add on. It's not an opportunity to ignore, replace, or just pretend like you don't care. I guess really it's just apathy. Apathy, something you hate, so you avoid. There's apathy and avoidance. That stuff just doesn't come up very often because it's just an opportunity to add. One way to not do that is when you hate something, like say something is presented to you and you think, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to hate it. So you're attached to something that you know from the past. You used to hate something, and then you look at this thing, it's like, I know I'm going to hate it. And then because of that, it mars everything you're going to do with it. Counter perspective. My perspective is, oh, I know in the past I hate this. But hey, guess what? This new thing, I'm probably going to hate it. But let's see if I learn more about how I hate it. So you're adding on, not ignoring. So I'm not saying, and on top of that, even if I know I'm going to hate this thing, I might end up liking it because I understand more about why I hate it. Or I could differentiate from my old self and learn more about why I hate it to end up liking it. That's kind of, all those possibilities are a thing. But the moment you say, this is not interesting to me because I know what I like, that's an attachment to your past. For better or for worse. We're not talking about you, if this is going to lead to a better quality of life, is this going to enhance your success? We're talking about inherently the logic, the objective logic of this. It requires you to be attached to your past self to fully ignore the value of something presented to you. Otherwise, it would be no expectations, and nothing is barring you from doing it. If you're attached to your past self, there are reasons for you to not do something. There are reasons for you not to care about something, or to hate something, or like something. The difference in a dynamic person is it's always open-ended, or it's more commonly open-ended when they do something. And for me, the deal breaker, the tiebreaker, like say, okay, well, then how does someone who has your perspective ever make a decision? Like, how do you even choose what to do if everything is always an open-ended decision? I trust people. I trust the conditions that prioritize what I need to do. So like if someone asks me for help, that's the tiebreaker. That's the other person. So the whole idea of like being nice helps me too. So I use my need for other people's input to break the tie. Like, how do I play this game? Why do I play this game? But not 100% of the time, obviously. I chose Like a Dragon because no one cares, to be honest. Let's just be really frank. Statistically, no one cares about Like a Dragon on Twitch. And guess what? I'm gonna rope this way back. The reason why nobody cares about Like a Dragon is exactly why it's unrelatable, non-resonance, and it's not a portrayal of mainstream gamers. Because the viewership view in things they desire. They have a personality that's, now being nice sounds like a chore. I love being nice, in my opinion. It's my safe, comfortable thing. Like, I absolutely, the niceness feeling is like, if I could do it without knowing that I'm just going to set myself up for some really bad things, it's just not in the cards yet. I maybe in the future it's more socially equitable, like, you know, somehow human race, like the human race decides, I don't know, we're gonna turn the preservation of humanity and how to be successful on its head. Maybe, I don't know, maybe when world hunger ends, or we don't fight for resources anymore. But being nice is not a viable option. Like, it's not constitutively being nice. It's not. I'm like 60-40 nice. Like, I'm gonna say, when I was a kid, I was like 95% and 5% nice. What does that end up with you? Alone, friends that maybe know you, or Possibly there will be one or two perceptive friends that will understand you. Chronically depressed, invisible. Like sometimes I would enter and leave places and people wouldn't even know I'm there. So like really invisible, like super invisible. So that changed quite dramatically. And it's thanks to people who are like the ones that I described that I really can't resonate with, but I learned a lot from them. I learned a lot from the people that made it. And they still don't really like doing that. Like the first comments, the first type of discussions we have when it comes to career is that, are there any parts of your career that you don't really like? Oh yeah, the part that you have to stick out and sell yourself. But it's the system. You can't deny. If you want to succeed in the system, you have to play ball. So I do know how to do those things, but it is incredibly exhausting. To you, I would say being nice does sound like a chore. To me, it's why I get up at night. I mean, it's why I get up all the time. It's why I lose sleep. But it's not encouraging. Like I don't really. It is a chore to everyone because it's a sacrifice. But I get off like, for a better phrase, I get off on being nice. As in, I would like to do that if I could make it a successful thing, like earn money, be popular, and I don't know, always have people owing me favors and like just showering me with adoration by being nice, then I would be a very different person now. But I am not. I still express my own opinions. I profoundly disagree with people when they are open enough for my like assertions and all that. But I would much rather, that's a chore to me. Sharing my opinions is a chore. Like basically the stuff that comes naturally, in my opinion, to most people are a chore to me. Like wanting to be popular, that's a chore. Like cloud chasing, that's an incredible chore. And you might be thinking, well, they think it's a chore too because they have to do it to be successful. It's like, it's not compared to being nice. Like you ask someone, hey, so would you be willing to do X and Y at no benefit to you, but benefit to me only? That's a chore. And personally, that's easier for me to do than drawing attention to myself. Like if I spent the next 3 months helping someone become a superstar student, and then that student just goes off and becomes a superstar, and no one knows better, winner. And it is for me. I don't know anyone IRL who thinks I'm nice or likable. That's interesting because being invisible and not liking to have to stick out is very relatable. But for me, it wasn't because I was nice. I just happened to respond in a way that made people not really, yeah. And it's tough. Like where like one of the things I have to say is one of the goats, in my humble opinion, is that when you're in a situation where you drive people away because you're very selective, right? Like your requirements, you can even call it as high standards. Like standards are relative to the person, and the more conditions you have, the higher standards it goes. The goat, like the goat skill required, and it's going to be my plug again about communication. But the idea is, for someone who's very selective and really values themselves a lot, which I'm going to say I rate myself about like a 3 out of 10. But if you're more like you think you're a 6 to 7 plus out of 10, those people will have standards. And those standards have to be accurate. So there's a lot of self-exploration. And when you go through periods of self-discovery, you can learn more and more about yourself. And when you actively learn more about yourself, you focus, in my opinion, is encouraged to focus on communicating that. And when you communicate that, you'll naturally project it accurately. So when you have the greatest self of self in sense of self, like the most accurate sense of self, you will naturally end up projecting that. And then the people around you will be like you. Like be like you. As in the idea that if everyone is inherently finding you not likable, it may well possibly be that you either need more self-discovery or the opportunities didn't present themselves like in the initial environment or something. There's a lot of cases, but one case that's within your control is a constant refinement of what you like, what you think you like, and getting it as accurate as it produces a success of an environment that makes you likable. Unfortunately, statistically, is rare, so you have to keep working. You have a high, like individuals with a great sense of self require higher thresholds, so they need to work at it a lot longer. And what do you put in that number, like a person rating as a whole? I don't really get that. It's statistical norms. So while we'll draw another contrast. While you might be looking for things, your next game that you're interested in, the next game, or like your next step in life, or what you have, or what you want, I'm looking for what the vast majority of people want. What is trending? What is culturally dissonant? What is relevant? I spend most of my time thinking about what other people care about. And when I put that number in, is how my person interacts with the vast majority of people. So I rate myself 4 out of 10 because I'm below average when it comes to being charismatically intuitive. So if I go into the audience, right, like on the internet or something, like, let's say I show up on Twitch Rivals or something, and they had a round table discussion, the viewership would probably rate me like 2 or 3 out of 10 because I would be unrelatable. Like if I was to express myself, like as a person, you know, like if I was hamming and become assertive and I would reveal what my opinions are, it would be below average. It would be 4 or below because I would represent unpopular opinions for the time. There's always a chance I could be invited to a round table about a topic that I represent the mainstream. But in terms of how, like, all the things I know right now, especially to this craft, 3 out of 10 probably. And 3 out of 10, what does that land you? That lands you with incredibly long hours of dedication. That's self-motivated. And no one cares. Maybe like 95% of people don't care. And knowing that, right? Knowing that helps me feel secure. I am very secure because my expectations are met. That's what I mean by getting an accurate understanding of yourself. So if you're unhappy with the results, as in, do you feel like you're a likable person? For example, like an inherently likable person, how do you characterize your likability? What does it take for the person you're talking to find you likable? And if you can accurately picture that person, which is a projection of you, right? You're projecting onto a person who's like you. You look for those people. and that increases your chance. Like, you learn and educate yourself based on a projection of yourself in order to surround actively and intentionally surround yourself with people who you don't have to explain anything to because they're like you. Yeah, and this is screaming with the idea of compatibility when it comes to likability. Likability is often based on compatibility. Growth is a whole different other story. When you're looking for growth, like in dynamics and stuff, I prefer to surround myself with people who are not like me. Because if they are like me, there's really rare time for growth because they will be agreeable to you. So you don't really learn new things. You get a reinforcement of all the things you learn. So that's for mastery. So when you're surrounding yourself with people like you, like resonating with you, it's for mastery. Basically, oh, I've done this. I played Like a Dragon for like 12 years. I don't know, something like that. And then if I want to really master everything there is to know about Like a Dragon, I would surround myself with that high standard 12-year tenure. Would I get new perspectives about Like a Dragon? No. I would just get better at the perspectives we already have. That's kind of like an OSU player who's at the top 100 only surrounding and interacting with themselves with top 100 players. They will no longer be practicing perspectives outside that sphere. You become a specialist. So for me, I like to keep a generalist perspective until maybe someone demands that I be a specialist. Otherwise, I burn out. So that's what happened to me. I burned out because I did the thing that I love, but it wasn't sustainable. I couldn't be myself all the time, per se, the whole fake, real thing. I couldn't be a part of me more of me is hidden in the dark than most of me. So nowadays, like, it doesn't really matter if it's 0 or 1,000. That's the part of me that makes me feel secure, right? While someone is agonizing over, oh man, I'm not seeing progress. I can't. Like, I see progress. You're doing something. If you're doing something, you have the propensity and opportunity to learn from it. But it's something I can't resonate with when someone says, oh, it looks like nothing's ever changing. I've spent 10 straight days and the same thing happens. Like, I don't think the same thing happens all 10 days. It's literally impossible for that to happen. It's quite literally impossible. As a person, as a linear time creature who's a summation of all their experiences, which you said, it's more of an attachment. If you truly believe you are more of an attachment person, like full force, like say you're like 90+% on that perspective, there's no possible way you would ever say you wasted your time. But that's a really extreme case. I'm more like 70 to 30%. I can appreciate sometimes that I do feel like I wasted my time. Like I've done something and the same result happens all the time. But because of the human condition, human noise comes in every time. You're not a robot. That's kind of what makes humans really awesome. If you hate something and you play it again and you say, I hate it the same way I did before, then you're a person with attachments. If you say you hate it and like, I still hate it, but I learned something else about hating it. You're actively looking for something to change that hate. Like you were open-minded enough to say, well, I could characterize it better. I could learn more about it. You don't write things off and be avoidant. That's kind of, to me, personally, That's the difference between a dynamic person and an attached person. They have their pros and cons and things, when to use it, when to be appropriate, right? In a career, you don't want to stay dynamic too long. If you're settling on a career, being dynamic can make you mediocre in a lot of things. It can show a lack of dedication, a lack of a conviction. Like Kiryu is full of conviction. He's not haphazard. He's not listless. Like, he doesn't waver back and forth. And that's kind of what he's talking about in this day and age. When he talks about youth, it's like, oh yeah, youth is like lacking conviction, right? Like, youth, they keep changing their mind and stuff. It's like, that's different from knowing themselves and doing it. So you're actively, I agree with the whole idea that they are dynamic, as in, it always feels like the youth doesn't understand what they really want. But the aspect that I'm talking about is assuming that the person is an adult who knows what they want, right? They can actually learn from their experiences, right? So we have to assume they can learn first. When you can't learn, you're always confused. So yes, I agree. They're dynamic in a sense of, the word I would use is chaotic. And a dynamic person is not chaotic. They're intentionally stirring the pot. They're not unintentionally stirring the pot. So when you're confused, cue many of the confusions. Like, you have 100 billion. You have like thousands of influencers telling you what is the best way to do something. You don't even form your own opinions yet. So yeah, confusion. It's chaos, not dynamics. I choose to openly have something to learn about. Not, I have no idea what the heck I'm doing, so I keep changing my mind. That's not learning anything. That's really, really scared. That's actually a really scary state. And that leads to nihilism, where like, there's so much stuff, I don't know what's going on, so whatever, I'm going for the ride. Take me, life. Take me and lead me to a series of events that hopefully leads, the end of the road is happiness. So yeah, I do agree with you in that perspective, that people are like, kids nowadays seem like they get attached to something because of YouTube algorithm, right? Like internet algorithm. But then at the same time, it just feels like they're constantly changing their minds and then reattaching themselves to something, and then changing their mind and reattaching themselves to something. True. I agree. Like, I'm trying to I'm trying to give you the impression that what you think from your perspective is still accurate. Like, it's what you observe, right? Like, it is explainable, and it's not one or the other. I'm not saying because I believe something it can't be yours. It's all of the above. It's different interpretations of what we observe. And yeah, it's actually really scary when when I start talking to someone who's like thinking about going to college, and they would say like, I think I'm going to college. So what do you mean you think you're going to college? And then I asked them, so what are you going to study in college? It's like, I think I want this. It's like, what do you mean you think you want this? Well, this guy said this is good. Okay, so do you think it's good? It's like, well, this guy said so, but what do you think? It's like, well, I think what this guy thinks. Oh. It's like, well, what about this other guy who disagrees with you? It's like, well, I don't like this guy as much, so I think this guy's right. That is very different. That is very different from, I don't know what this guy's opinion is, But you know what? I want to watch his opinion and understand from his perspective. Not, I disagree with this guy. I don't want to watch it. Or this guy, I heard about this guy. I don't care. So those are like the three states. I'm if I were to total up those three states, it'd be like 70% are meh, pass. 25 to 30%, almost all of it. The remainder is like, I need answers. Is this guy going to provide me with the answers? Because I'm so confused. And then the 1 to 2% is like, well, you know what? I want to know what other people are doing all the time. So there is a little bit of overlap. The people who are confused do want to know what their current attachment is doing, but not for the benefit of learning for them. They want to be told how to solve their confusion. And it's healthy. It's healthy to an extent, as long as you have an identity, right? So if you have an identity, like you know what you want, then you look to that person to learn what you need to learn to better yourself, like to understand yourself, right? But nowadays, it's to an extreme where I would say over 30%, maybe increasing, and 30% is a lot. And we're talking about like young people, predominantly young people. They are looking to be told how to live their lives because they haven't had the opportunity to even determine what that is anymore. So you get to the point where like, oh yeah, this guy's really rich. They had all these things. I want that. That's the object of desire. So they form their identity based on that person. And then they get attached. And when that person violates something or whatnot, they move to the next attachment. And then they spend their entire lives towards that person. And that's the danger of influencers. You're not getting, and one of the dangers is not to say that you shouldn't ever do this, but remember that influencers are within the frame. They're behind the frame. So it's like a fictional character. What's behind the frame of Like a Dragon's characters? Everything that's in the game. Is that their entire life as a fictional character? Well, no, not really. It's just whatever's in the game. When you're looking at an influencer, you only see what's produced. You don't see anything else. It's not like they're going to sit down and try to spend 100 to 300 hours summarizing their lives and the ups and downs. That's not their craft. So if you can't resonate with a fictional character, you shouldn't be able to resonate generally at that same level that I'm talking about with anyone who produces entertainment for you, as in any content creator. There are some asterisks. There are those incredible people who are trying to do that, but they're not that popular when it comes to that. No one's going to sit there and listen to hundreds of hours of their reflection when they're doing something. I should know. I should know about spending hundreds of hours reflecting on everything I do being mainstream interesting. And it is a niche place. So they have to resonate with you. How do you resonate with someone who lived longer than you, right? Or live in a different country? It's not really that. So you stick with superficial things. Superficial meaning it's not bad or good. Superficial as in it is relatable out of context. Playing a video game. Acquiring a skill, doing physical activities, production, artwork. I mean, even artwork is kind of loose. Like, it's hard. Like, even music. So any type of production is superficial. It's a product, an extension of the person. So you can use that as a closer bridge to another person. But you're not there sitting there be like, hey, let's grab a drink every like 8 hours of your day or something, or like spending a lifetime together. You can't have that with them. You don't have enough time to do that realistically. So in this case, a video game is a lens into something that could be you. And if you're looking for things that you desire and you want to play as the things you desire, is what I'm saying about the difference between me, this experience with Arena, and I would say 7 out of 10 Twitch streamers. They're looking, the greatest things they summarize, like the top 10 stuff, they're going to say, this is my legacy. I like this because this makes me feel good. I like this because it feels nice, as in the game feels the way I want to feel because there's a connection. Mechanics has a core connection with the self. If the game is super jank, that's fine with me. My resonance don't rely on how I feel. It relies on how I understand the product as a projection of someone else. So if the developer says, yeah, we kind of screwed up on this controls, but you know, it kind of worked out. It's like, I feel you. Like, say no more. It makes me feel awful though. I wanted to tell you in the most endearing way that your control scheme made me want to throw a control across the room, but in a great way. Because I didn't know I could even have those feelings about wanting to throw a control across the room until I met a game that you made intentionally to be that frustrating. That's kind of the idea. And I would do it with a smile because I genuinely mean it. That's very interesting. If I spend most of my time playing a game, it's like, oh yeah, you know, I've been playing this game for 14 years. You don't have to tell me about these things. Immediately unlikable. But also likable because you're probably good at what you're doing. So when it comes to likability and sentimentalism, it's different from admiration. If you want to be admired for being good at something and you're streaming to be admired for it, you attract people who want to be admired too. Because you're projecting that. You are most happy when you are admired and you accomplish things. Right? So like, if you think you're really good at something and you're showing that you're really good at something, the people that resonate with you are people who want to be good at something and resonate with being good at it. So the moment you stop performing, they stop caring, because you would stop caring if they stop performing. Here's a vicious mind-blown cycle here. Think about viewership. If you are a performer and you attract and project other performers, when you stop performing, they stop watching. So whenever I said something like, I don't resonate with the community, that's what I mean. I cannot be a performer, so I clearly don't resonate with the community. I have to carve whatever it is that reality served me, and I am content about it. I'm content pandering or maybe encouraging the 1 or 2 people who feel isolated, who feel invisible, have a sense of lack of direction. Just that one person, maybe, who don't even go on Twitch to find that type of thing. Maybe it will be a trend in the future, but I can tell you honestly, it wouldn't matter if it becomes popular later. I'll still continue to do it. The status of what I'm doing now is inherently independent of being popular. It's inherent of asserting myself, which is the one thing I suck at, right? So I'm trying to make it that the one thing I like to do, like inherently myself, that I like to do is sustainable. I'm turning that into something because it doesn't burn me out. It doesn't ever burn me out. These digressions do not burn me out. What would burn me out is putting me in a room of other popular streamers when I'm not popular and having me explain to them why I'm not popular and why they are popular and expecting them to be more or less unintentionally gaslit by me. That would be incredibly straining and difficult. I don't want there's no motivation in my opinion in my life that I want to place any opinions on individuals who are already popular, have influence and whatnot. They know what they're doing. They're like, with greatest respect of their success, they are good at their craft. I don't have to challenge it. Because my feeling of rewardedness has nothing to do with the whole righteous indignation of being right about them. They don't. I don't. Frankly, it would be disrespectful to tell them what they probably already know about themselves. To be honest, like, if I had to presume, they probably already know that about what they're doing. Being that successful and consistent requires that, so you don't burn out. If you do burn out, then it speaks for itself. When a person burns out, they know what they did. They embraced something that was non-sustainable that they thought was sustainable. This is sustainable. If it becomes like 1,000 or 2,000, it's probably going to become unbearable. Like, I probably can't even do that. So, I mean, maybe. But I'll still attempt it, right? I'll still attempt. I don't mind burning out for the sake of burning out. So what I mean is, I don't mind burning out, recovering, burning out, recovering. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to grow or be dynamic. So, however, right now, I'm doing something sustainable until someone encourages me to do something that I might inherently burn out in. I don't feel like burning out is something you avoid either. I feel like some people could take that as a passive-aggressive statement. They can, probably. I think actually the majority of people, a lot of the things I said probably would be considered antagonistic. And that's kind of where the gaslighting thing comes in, right? If they don't think it's passive-aggressive, then there isn't unintentional. That means they're not strong enough to have their own identities. So those people, I feel I worry about the most when being around me. Influencers that are incredibly prominent and popular, that's the least of their concerns, in my opinion. The liability of what they say. It's very few. I would say 60% of 100% top influencers are more concerned with their craft, like how well they do things, how they, if whatever unintentional, like, oh, this person could see it as passive aggressive, this, it doesn't stop them from go-getting, from being proactive and continuing to focus on their craft. That's the self-centered nature that makes them great. They're great at what they do because they continue to do it, weighing the consequences, but not as much as someone who is wishy-washy, constantly being conscientious. Those people are not go-getters, and I'm not a go-getter. I go-get when I need to go-get. I don't go-get because I want to go-get. So it makes me less, like, in a way, a lot of people would say it makes me less successful, less prominent, less important. But what it doesn't make me is less happy. It keeps my happiness. I'm sustainable. So that's enough for me. Living a quaint life is great. It just so happens that I could reach a bigger audience for those people who want a similar lifestyle, then that's great. Like, maybe a platform out there would one day say, hey, if you have this personality like this guy, come to our platform. I would do it. in a heartbeat, without a doubt, pragmatically speaking, which is not a culture, not a community culture that I can resonate with, clearly, because I'm not popular, right? So most of the stuff that I'm doing intellectually and intentionally, not accidentally, I'm doing this intentionally with plans, schedules, as much as I can professionally or former professionally, and I'm not popular. Yes, I could still be the problem. I agree, I am the problem. And also, the platform is a problem. It's not one-way street. You know, like popularity is interpersonal. It's between the person and everything else, including the system. So if there was a platform that immediately says we have a center focus on your type of personality, you'll see me over there immediately. But there isn't. So I accept that. And because I understand why that's happening, I feel very comfortable just droning on to my sub and recording for my own legacy. And then maybe one day, upon reflection, if it saves someone and inspires someone, that's worth it. I'm not here to inspire millions. I'm here to save that one person who feels like no one resonates with them. So just like my younger self, where I had very few close friends who truly understand me, the people, like, I'm always invisible and I feel like no one can relate to me. Just like that, I continue to stick to that. And sure enough, society hasn't changed that much. There are things that they have changed, and I'll list some of them just for superficial reasons, for fun times. I joke about it a lot of times. But just for that one kid, you know, the 1 out of 100 kid who's always the center of bullying, I expect that same ratio. You have 100,000, say 100,000 concurrent viewers on Twitch. I'm talking about that one person. If there's a platform that I can go to that will lift that 1 out of 100,000 viewer that feels isolated, can't relate, they feel like they always suck at things, they can't be selfish and having truly problems with niceness, and they lift all those people and move to another platform, I'll be there. But for the time being, I am catering to that 1 in 100,000. I'm gonna say roughly 1 in 100,000, maybe 2 in 100,000 people. That's what I'm doing, and it warms my heart because it allows me to do what I think is great for those people. If I never meet them, that's c'est la vie, unfortunately, because there's no system promoting that. There's no influencer who isn't juggling working the system and just not caring about the system. So it's a necessary process. And the people I admire a lot on influence, like on that side of things, they are like 1 out of 100 influencers. And yes, they stick out like a sore thumb. And they do the stuff that burned me out a long time ago. And they do it so well. And I admire, respect them for that. Like, they're able to juggle the two things, like catering to a niche community, but converting people at the same time, all while handling all that, like, stuff that allows you to get money, fame, connections. They had it, and that's great. But I would totally be game for a platform that only caters to that 1%. The downside is a platform like that can't exist in this day and age, because where are they going to get the money? From those 1 out of 100,000 people that is struggling to be healthy and happy and fitting in? Those people are probably not making money either. So, like, say you lift the 100 and 100,000 that I'm catering to. All those people are probably struggling in their teens like I did. And you lift them, who's going to pay the bills? It's a more of a niceness thing. a niceness system, like a welfare system, would be able to freely say, like, for example, all right, we get a money bag person who is a liaison. So you have someone who mediates between the people who are making a lot of money and this charity case. We'll just call it the charity case. And they will fork the bill for this platform that caters to a smaller group and use that platform as publicity for the bigger platform. That's a possibility. It could work. Plenty of examples of that, especially born and raised American. There's ways that works. It can work. It's philanthropic though. So it's kind of like you're akin to your millionaires and your billionaires feeling like, I'm going to gift to charity. That kind of thing. So the model can work. But as a streaming platform that is sustaining and having people who have money, well, money makers are not the people I cater to. I'm just going to be honest. I'm terrible at making money. How do you expect me to surround myself and attract people who are good at making money? Like, that's so unrealistic. It's just like what I say about projecting yourself, right? I am projecting myself. And because of projecting myself, generally speaking, people who struggle with making money, who don't like standing out in different ways, who feel like they really want to be nice, typically don't make a lot of money, and they're probably not very popular. So my goal often is, remember that if you're around me, like, you know, like if you're hearing what I'm saying, I have to also be aware of what I'm not saying and what I'm not doing for you. So being around me won't make you popular. I'm just gonna be honest here. Like, if you were to mimic or take inspiration or do things that I do, inherently you have to like it. Like, you have to resonate, or else it's gonna be a chore. But when there are things I do really well that some people can take advantage of, and I never hear from them again, and that's great, because that's all I want to do. Like, for why do I stream then? That's what I want to do. I want to give the skills. Yeah, being popular sounds like a chore for sure. So what I do as Twitch, right, on Twitch, is I'm capturing legacy. I want to digress. I want to share my extension of my video games and my experience, because you can take those and just leave. You don't have to like me. You don't have to hate me. You don't have to support me. I don't ever give you that guilt, or at least I try not to make people feel guilty of that, because it's not my career. And my intent is to just give those things away so you don't have to hate me and feel hold me responsible because you behave a certain way that made you unpopular. But there are characteristics and skills that I have that people can take advantage of. It's kind of like, can you patent people's skills? No, you really can't. Well, you can, kind of, sort of. Like, for example, I could release a book on how to learn things very efficiently. And when I mean by learn things, I'm not talking about 10 steps. How to spend 2 or 3 years developing a proper learning experience. Like how you're able... What the... Did you just baguette me? So, I can teach things about learning, communication, personality disorders. Like, when I mean by this, I'm not talking about diagnosing personalities. I'm talking about, like, avoiding them, preventive measures, like holistic stuff that you can just take, and whatever that helps you get your goal, which I don't get. That's the idea of content creation, in my opinion. Content creation should be viewed, going all the way back to the beginning, content creation should be viewed like a fictional character. It should be viewed like a game mechanic. They offer you a piece of the bigger picture. And it is up to you as the puzzle collector to collect pieces that plug together in a different way for you so that it works. But if you don't have a box to bring things into, you are confused. You are chaotic, as in you're looking for desperation, for attachment. That attachment comes from needing to form a core. Very healthy people form attachments to their past and try to maintain that attachment because it is their core. It is their self-identity. When you become fluid or more fluid like myself, it only means my core is just strong enough to allow it. So open-mindedness, insecurities, whatnot, or security. Let's think proactive. Security, open-mindedness, change, emotional stability, that comes with how strong your core is. And it's kind of ironic here, though. This is a little counterintuitive. The people who are more self-centered and narcissistic and are a little bit more emotionally distraught when they try to explore new things, their core is weaker. It's a lot more fragile. When someone is intentionally and dynamically always seeking new things and comfortable with that because nothing really shatters their resolve, that's where the insecurity subsides. So if you ever want to reach a state of dynamic thinking, I can probably help with that. But it doesn't make you good at any one thing. You have to know that it takes away from that. Like, if you're constantly like me, you're not going to get very good at something. And you have to remember that I already really honestly got good at something already. So my life kinda got a fulfillment of that already. So when someone is listening to me talk about being dynamic, being open-minded, you have to remember I also am a human with a life history. And that life history requires to be told. And that's the disclaimer. I've spent 12 years being good at something, getting good at something. Most people who say, oh, but I like the way to be open-minded and stuff. It's like, well, have you already spent 12 years getting good at something? Because if you did, maybe you'll have the self-esteem to be an open-minded person. But if you're like 18, you don't feel like you're good at anything, you haven't developed a core thing that defines you yet. And you need that, because that's gonna, in my opinion, it's incredibly healthy. Before you explore something, it's nice to have something consistent. It's part of the human condition. You need a rock. You need a foundation. So every time I say things, I'm usually catering to people who went up and down already. And that's what means by I cater to older people. And when I mean older people, not biologically older people. Like, you could be a 13-year-old who already went to college and had a graduate degree. Yes, they do exist. You can be like progeny that went... But the idea is your mental age. I cater to older people. And that makes me unpopular. Like, until Twitch people become older. But then when they become older, they typically don't do things that Twitch represents. Right? So there's a platform about... I don't know. How to reconcile... The top streamers are how to reconcile relational advice between a child and a parent. Perhaps. Is that popular? No, because parents don't inherently have time to consume and stream like that. Can it get normalized? Possibly, because eventually, right? Eventually, the people of today are going to be the parents of tomorrow, hopefully. Like, healthily. So, there may be a platform in the future for would-be parents who grew up in this environment. But if you try to create a platform now for the current parents, I mean, how many parents still have trouble assembling a PC and logging on and using technology right now? It's like more than 50%. So that's just not happening. So I have to remember that I also represent a minority of people, like just a vast minority of people. And Twitch is based on resonance. Algorithm is based on resonance. What you're looking for. I'm not what people are looking for. If there's a adult now who has a child resonating with me wanting to play video games and offering what I just said I offer, it would be hard to believe because they wouldn't have the child in the first place. I don't have a child. Right? So you gotta fix the reality. I draw in people that have certain characteristics that overlap with me because I'm actively projecting that. You could be a nice person and always get hated on and get and be invisible and always streaming to 0 people. You could do that. Like, it's possible. That means you never share your opinion. You only play without any opinion at all. Then you just have no one to resonate with. And that's what happened with Arena, the character, which let's just bring it all the way back to the character. Arena didn't have any friends. Until now. She made her first friend because she doesn't ever express her own opinions. That's what I was like as a kid. No opinions. Because you're too afraid to share your opinions. You're not assertive enough. And you only share the opinions the people that you share with. So they will never know what you like. So you are practically invisible. When someone says, what is so-and-so like? And if you're Arena, they'd be like, I don't know. She's kind of fake because she's everything I want. But it's not like it's real. Quote unquote real. But there is a difference between intentionally doing it and thinking you have no choice. So Arena is young. She doesn't think there's any other way to interact. I choose when I want to be agreeable with someone. And I usually choose to be agreeable 80% of the time. And only when I know it's safe to attempt to blow the person's mind, I'll do it. But only when I know. And I take gambles sometimes, and they fail. They fail miserably. I think 3 or 4 instances when it sticks out, it happens. I know those instances. I mean, one ended up with, you know, a derogatory term, and the other ended up with calling. So let me just give you a hot take. 1, I was accused of mansplaining. 2, I was called a snowflake. 3, I was called a communist. So those 3 situations, I can tell you those stories. That's what happened when I jumped the gun and really took a risk. But other than that, out of like the hundreds to 200s of people that I've talked to, you know, they either don't care. They usually don't care. That's how that's the Twitch culture. If you don't care, you leave. That's it. Content creators are here to serve you, the viewer. That's what the platform implies. Not the other way around. Or not an interpersonal thing. Content creators is a source of tools and information, and I treat it as so in order to make it sustainable. As much as you want to say you're here to become buddies with the content creator, that's a different platform. And it's closer to YouTube than it is to any other platform, but I don't think that platform actually exists. Actually, you probably develop more relationships, intimate relationships on other platforms than either of these two. I'll let you imagine what I'm talking about. And I do really have to go to the bathroom before I resume this, so I'll be right back. Because we still got 2 hostesses left, and I want to do the 2 hostesses. Good question. Thanks for the discussion, by the way, Worm.